Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Paper Girls Season 1, Episode 1. It is called Growing Pains, and it is a first episode, so I'll start spoiler free and give you a general idea of what the show is, and my thoughts and feelings, and maybe I'll get to some spoilery stuff in a little bit, and give you a warning before I do so. This is a new Amazon Prime show. It is an adaptation of a comic book by Brian K. Vaughan and Cliff Chang. I have read the first... certainly the first volume, which is the first 6 issues, maybe a little more than that, but not much more. Because this is one of these books where I kind of tried to keep up with the single issues when it started, and then inevitably, like I always do, I fell behind. I've got the first 4 volumes out of 6, because the whole thing is only 6 volumes, so it's like 36 issues all in. So should this get more seasons, I imagine it'd only be like a 3-season show to do the whole thing, something in that range. But so I don't have all the answers to the mysteries because I didn't read that far, but I did have an idea of how it was going to start and the general premise. I really like Brian K. Vaughan as a writer, as a comic book writer, so I was curious to see how they were going to adapt this. The other big book that he did, I did read all of, which is Why the Last Man. I loved that comic book. Got a really mediocre adaptation that got cancelled after 1 season, like last year. So I was hopeful for this, but you don't really know what the quality is going to be like. Is it going to really capture the feeling of the comic, and what makes the comic kind of addictive and special, and if it captures the characters that are in the book and that kind of thing. So I was very curious to see what they're going to do with this, especially since naturally it was going to lead to Stranger Things comparisons, because it's part of it, at least, is set in the 80s with a group of kids. All girls, obviously, these 4 paper girls who are doing their paper route, and they're cut up into this, science fiction-y plot. So there's going to be natural comparisons to make with Stranger Things, and what's funny is that the comic book, I don't know if it may predate Stranger Things by a little bit. I can't remember exactly when the comic book started, but it certainly didn't. I don't remember thinking, "Oh, this exists because Stranger Things is a big hit." It never really felt like that, I don't think. So yeah, the general premise is that these 4 paper girls get up on Hell Night, which is the morning after Halloween, where there's still drunk, like, costume people running around, and they get into some weird chaos. This first episode is only about 38 minutes. It's very quickly paced as well. Like, once it gets going, it felt like the first 38 minutes of a movie as opposed to like the first chapter of an 8-episode TV show. But it's not because sometimes when people say a streaming show, which is like all put out as a binge, like this is, sometimes people say it's all shot like a movie that's just split up into chapters, to mean that nothing really happens for the first like 5 or 6 episodes before things really start to get going. That's not the case here. This is like breakneck speed. Like, things just start going very quickly. There's 10 minutes to introduce the characters and start to care about them, and then immediately weird stuff starts happening to send them off onto the plot. I guess did I like it? That's the first question I would say. Is yeah, I kind of did. It's definitely very low budget. The effects and the more science fiction elements you get hints of in this first episode, I'll just say there's some characters with some costumes and it looks really cheesy and cheap. Maybe that adds to the charm a little bit, I don't know. But what I did like about it was the overall vibe, which is it's the late night or early morning even, and these girls are out delivering papers and dealing with like assholes and like looking out for each other. The vibe of that kind of stuff was great. The 4 girls themselves, I really thought they had good chemistry. They were entertaining to watch. They're bouncing off each other, which was good. The way they were reacting to some of the weird stuff, I kind of enjoyed. If anything, it could have slowed down a little bit, which is not something I usually say with binge shows. I'll say that much. And then, as the weird stuff started to happen, yeah, some of it felt quite cheap, but like there was kind of a nice, like, odd tone to it. When there's a portion of the episode where like there's a lot of like purple or pink lighting kind of like bathing everything, and there was just kind of a vibe to like the show. It kind of feels like a low budget movie that was made in the 80s and like has somehow unearthed here in present day, and this is what it is. So yeah, very quickly paced. I had a decent time though watching it. It's like, I can't really compare it to Stranger Things. It's such a weird thing to do. Like, yeah, like if you ask me my gut reaction right now, yeah, it's not as good as Stranger Things, but it's kind of a weird thing to judge after one episode. But you know, I don't really want to compare it to that because I just think there's a lot of differences. I mean, obviously the big thing with Paper Girls is that, and I know this is a spoiler to say, it's kind of part of the main premise. It's introduced by the end of the first episode. There is some time travel elements to it. But there's also like these other mysterious elements that we get glimpses of in this first episode that like you can't really explain yet, and I'm sure it's going to like delve into more of it as it goes on. I'm sure the comic book did explain it all by the end. So yeah, that'd be my base thing, is that I just enjoyed the adventure element and the girls being like, what the hell is going on? What is going on with the lighting? What's going on with these weird characters we're suddenly running into? And like, yeah, like there's just a good vibe to it, is the best thing I could say. And I really like the four characters played off of each other. They all felt very natural. They felt very different. I like some of the teases of kind of like all their individual lives. So Erin, who's kind of the main girl, she's new. This is her first day doing the paper route. She's Chinese and her mother barely speaks English. And there's like all these hints that her mother doesn't have a good time like getting to know the neighbors or getting to know people around them because people are generally a bit racist, or the language barrier just gets in the way and she feels like no one likes her. So you get kind of like this idea of like Erin actually looks after her mother in a lot of ways that other kids her age don't need to, because she's the one who can speak English at least fluently, and can like help her with situations and things like that. You know, then we have Tiffany, who is the one who whips out the walkie-talkies. She's the one who's nice to Erin to begin with. And you know, she kind of seems like the one who's like headstrong, got some leader vibes to her. You've got Mac, who's kind of the bad ass girl of the group, who is, you know, comes from the poorer family. There's a lot of references from her about not being able to afford nicer clothes or nicer things. And then the fourth girl, KJ, she is Jewish, and there's some references to her coming from a very rich family, and the idea that her mother buys her all these fancy dresses and so on and so on. So you get a sense that all four of them are very different and come from very different backgrounds, and that is going to feed into how they bounce off of each other, and that it is this kind of misfit group of characters. And I suspect, you know, like these themes that it's kind of like provoking, because it doesn't really necessarily say a lot about them in this first episode. It just kind of presents them. It just kind of says, okay, here's our starting point. Here's where, you know, the backgrounds they all come from. And I suspect that these themes are going to be explored heavily as we go on. And we're going to see, you know, because even Erin at the start of the episode, like she has to go up and like take a paper back because she's given it to the wrong house. And the guy comes out and accuses her of stealing his paper, and she, you know, he says something about, you know, it's bad enough that you Japs are doing this or that, and she's like, I'm Chinese, and he's like, I don't care. So you get the element of like the casual racism just kind of seeping in there. So all of the characters are, you know, they're not like super layered and like deep from like a prestige TV standpoint, but certainly if you look at this as like kind of like a pulpy sci-fi story or a movie, that, you know, the characters are exactly how I would feel about any like movie characters that have been introduced in a story like this. It's a credit to it that it does have this kind of upbeat kind of vibe to it, this kind of upbeat quality that it kind of never really like lets it slow down, and does let it kind of, so far anyway, let it brisk over any of the cheesier like effects or anything that's kind of popped up. And there's not even a lot of effects in this. I'm saying effects, like I'm really just meaning costumes and a couple of weird transitions, more than like traditional the visual effects. Because like the pink glow that comes from the sky at one point, like it feels like it has kind of a cheap look to it, but it also kind of added to like the weird feeling that it had. It's kind of weird to say. I don't know. I think some people might not like this and just kind of like not feel it at all. I think some of the lesser elements of it are actually kind of appealing to like my quirky tastes more than anything else. I really, you know, like, yeah, there's a lot of this that appeals to me. I like sci-fi stories. I like sort of tough kids in the 80s kind of teaming up and forming like a strong friendship and like going on an adventure. Like these are all things that I appeal to me. The sort of plot ideas that I grew up with and really enjoy. And that general feeling I liked. So, I should probably give the spoiler warning now, so I can just talk about how the episode ends and the sort of the bigger, more sort of broad things that maybe we're going into. So spoilers now for the end of episode 1. It's not huge though. If you wanted to just hear the spoilers that I'm about to say, I don't think it would. It might still sell you on the show. So choose to stay or not at your own risk. It's kind of up to you. But so we're introduced at the start of the episode to a character who turns out to be older Erin, right? Who hears a noise in her house. There's some light from the windows, pink light that matches the light we see later on in the 1988 part of the show. But at the end of the episode, when Erin brings the other girls back to her house, we hear, "Who's in my house?" And then out walks older Erin. So somehow they have traveled to the future through all this. And they kind of have this moment of realizing, and they both say, "Holy shit." And I distinctly remember this being the ending of one of the issues. I don't know if it was issue 1 or if it was maybe like a couple issues in, but I remember this moment being the end of an issue in the comic. And it's fairly well handled. I think what I like about it, in terms of like the way it progresses in the episode, and probably in the comic as well, but it's been a few years since this was back when it was first coming out. There's a lot of weird kind of like unclear parts where transitions have happened. Like, when did they actually travel through time? And even before they travel through time, there's a period of the episode that's kind of like everyone's disappeared, but they realize that they've not seen any people walking around and no cars driving in the town. And obviously it's early in the morning, but it's still like too quiet and weird. Like there's a certain point where they don't see anyone, the sky's pink, and then when they go out venturing again, because Erin gets accidentally shot by Mac, in a total dumb moment for the characters, but not only is there weird like robot bees or whatever they are that come and heal her at one point, like the weird characters that have the odd haircuts that are talking through this weird voice modulation. Who are like, you have no idea where you are, you're far away from home, even if you don't realize it. And then there's these characters in sort of the white, silvery uniforms that show up and kill the guys in the black uniforms. The guys in the black uniforms seem to be the good guys, but I mean, it's just kind of based on what we see. There's not really much to go on. But because the people in the white uniforms are just straight up assassinating them, it seems like they're the villainous ones. And like, there's a moment where Erin kind of like passes out and like sees like a weird vision of like, I think the president? It's like really weird. Like, it's really weird. But then when they get to her house after they decide to go there, they've traveled to the future, and it's like there's not really any clear kind of. There's a bit of like a. Not I would say a dream quality, but there's kind of like a. We don't really know when we crossed over and what made them cross over, and this like war that's going on between like these interdimensional aliens or interplanetary aliens or whatever they are, these people with the weird voices and the uniforms, are they just people from the future? Even maybe they're just like from our own future, they're just from far down the future. There's this war between these two factions and it's bleeding through time, but clearly, yeah, you assume that they're to do with why there's a time anomaly of any kind. It's them that's done it in some way, maybe not intentionally, maybe they've accidentally looped the girls into it. Why did they mean to run into Erin when they first bumped into her that kind of started off this chain of events, or was that an accident that sort of pulled the girls into this and now it's like shit? But part of what's so appealing to me about this is that immediately the girls like, okay, we have to go back and like get was it Tiffany's walkie-talkie back, like let's go, let's be a team, let's be proactive, and let's go do it. That feels like very old school 80s movie, like group of kids vibe to me, and I really appreciate that part of it. I just enjoy that typically, so that's good stuff. I think for looking at like the rest of the season, I do want to watch the rest of it. I'm a little bit worried that Amazon have barely promoted this because I feel like I've seen nothing for it. I don't even think when I did the Patreon pilot vote at the end of last month, the trailer for this wasn't even out yet. There was no poster for it yet either, I don't think. Those things obviously exist now. At some point they did come out, but like we were a month away from it starting with the premiere date, and there still wasn't any of this information out there. So I'm a little bit worried that it's been sent out to die and won't get any more seasons, but I am down to watch the rest of it. As for reviewing the rest of it, I'm not really sure what the goal is here. I mean, I debated on watching the second one before doing this, just because like doing a 2 and then 2 3s split up neater. No, I didn't check the runtime of the rest of the episodes, but if some of them are around this length, they're going to be shorter. So I think what I'll probably do is watch the next 3 or 4, come back, check in, give my sort of halfway through the season thoughts, and then watch the rest and give my full season thoughts. Because there's 8 episodes, so there's 7 episodes left. So I'm thinking like a 3 and a 4, or 4 and a 3, something in that range. I am working through Yellow Jackets right now, although this is the new show, so I, in theory, should prioritize this. So I'm not sure how I'll divvy up my viewing after the weekend. I'm too busy the weekend to watch either. But when I hit next week, I will be working through the shows, and we'll see how it goes. But I did enjoy this first episode, and it is definitely kind of like scratching an itch for me. But yeah, I something about it does feel kind of niche though. Like, I don't necessarily see it being this huge thing in the same way that Stranger Things took off. And maybe that's just because it's similar enough that it'll feel like a secondary thing compared to it. Which is a shame, because it would be nice if it found an audience, but I dig the feel of it. I think I was a little bit worried at the start that it was going to feel cheap, which it does, but like cheap and kind of just I don't know, superfluous, and in the grand scope of like TV land, where there's like so many different shows doing so many things, and some of them are similar to this. I was worried it was going to feel, and I think part of the breakneck pace of it, where it kind of feels like, oh, this is not spinning wheels, this is just going, and so I'm curious to see if it keeps up that pacing as we go into more episodes, because it was kind of an adrenaline rush watching most of this episode. So yeah, I'm into it. But shorter episodes. I may not have as much to say about each individual episode, so my new format of doing these binge shows by just sort of doing them in big chunks is probably wise. So I'll be back with some more soon-ish. Sometime next week I'll be back with my sort of first half of the season thoughts, I guess. But if you have checked out Paper Girls episode 1, do in the comments mention what how you felt. Do you like the show? If you do like the show or don't like the show, have you read the comic? That kind of thing. It's kind of weird, like theorizing and speculating about like what's going on with stuff when there is a source material, so the answers are all out there. Unless they change some significant things, the answers are there. In fact, it kind of made me want to go read the comics from start to finish, because it's not that long a comic book run, and I did start it and like it once upon a time, and I've got most of it bought already. So, it did make me want to go read it. So I mean, that's a plus if nothing else. But yeah, so that is episode 1 of Paper Girls. So yeah, let me know what you thought in the comments. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all that stuff. It helps out a lot if you can do that. And of course, you can support all the content by hitting the super thanks button below the video, or going over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and supporting us over there, and getting some bonuses for your trouble. But that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?